Hello, everyone, and welcome to SydneyAlp.net September. So we have Alex, our presenter, and Francis, and me. So if you're here, please post a comment and say hello, and we'll just wait a sec to make sure we've actually got people watching before we get started.
Everyone.
Hello.
Hi,
have
everyone.
Oleksandr, that's good. It takes a little while for the numbers to come through to StreamYard. So, all right, it looks like we have real people watching, so that is good.
Okay.
Hey, we got lots of real people. Very good.
Okay. Yeah. I can't see anyone. I can't see anyone on there yet.
I can see the comments. We have at least 5 or 6 real people watching.
Oh, hang on. I'm in the.
All right. So today we've got Alex, and I'm going to let Francis do the intro. But just before we do, because Francis and Alex used to work together in Amsterdam, so he's definitely the best person to do that. But just before we get started, so we have, you guessed it, a JetSbrains license to give away, or 2. So stay to the end, and I'll think of some questions to ask you based on the talk. And if you get them right, well, Alex suggested the most ridiculous answer, so maybe we could afford that as well as an option if you don't know the correct answer or for a JetSbrains license. And what else? I think that's pretty much the main things. Give it over to Francis for the intro.
All right, thanks, James. So yeah, I don't know. I think for some of the long-time viewers might remember Alex. He gave a talk on this channel, I think around exactly about a year ago, I think, about micro front ends. And that was like, I think, definitely one of the more kind of entertaining talks that we had. And it's actually like a great personal pleasure to introduce Alex to those that haven't seen Alex give a presentation before. Today, he's going to talk about AI and JavaScript frameworks. So, it sounds like two very kind of controversial
topics, at least, yeah.
Topic, I should say. So, yeah, I'm very intrigued and excited to see what Alex has to say today. So.
I think it's a controversial take on these things, so stand by for something exciting.
Yeah. Thank you for the introduction, Francis.
No problem.
Actually, I have a slide about .NET as well, to justify my presence here today.
Oh, hang on, is that it?
Do you want me to bring on the presentation? It was a little premature.
Yeah, you can share the slides. Like, I'm already full screen.
All right, they're all up.
There is also going to be some demo time later. So, hi everyone again. Thank you for a warm welcome. I'm Alex, been here a year ago. Happy to be here again. Today is going to be a weird talk. Like, you may think a couple of times that I'm an idiot throughout this discussion, but just please stay until the end. It's going to make sense later. And it's one of the reasons I decided to discuss it in this specific venue, because like Australia is far away and you really cannot hurt me for things I'm going to say. Usually I don't go with like long introductions about myself, but in the context of this presentation, it's gonna make sense. So what should I know about me? Like, I'm never wrong. Like in 2014, I made a bet on PHP framework, and I thought like it's the absolute future of like entire software development. In 2015, and so I code the way throughout 2017, I was telling everybody that Angular 2 is like the framework of the future and React stands no chance. In 2017, I was advertising the weird Express framework, which didn't really take off and remained a niche technology. Also in 2017, I had a spicy take that soon we're going to have much better accessibility support because governments are going to do their job. Yeah, then I still had some another wave of love to React, which never really materialized. So as you can see, like I'm never wrong. But why so? It's all because front-end engineers that have passion. Like I really liked the technologies I built and I use. I contributed into some of them as well. And the reason why front-end engineers like so many frameworks, because we want to have a better future for our kids. Like we intentionally make more and more complicated frameworks so we can keep our friends employed, and eventually we have enough accumulated engineering complexity to ensure that our kids can get employed too. So that's
good. I have 2 children, so it's quite important.
yes. I was caring for them to have a job in the future to ensure that we have enough work for everybody. But as you can see, that's dynamic of front-end tooling has been decreasing, and it might be attributed to my personal fatigue and a loss of the interest in various frameworks. But also, I think that most of the people in the community aligns that new tools do not provide us a massive increase in efficiency. Like there is no point for us to learn a new framework and get into some early adopter niche again just to get 5 or 10% quicker development velocity or like 5-10% better developer experience, right? So we got a technology which just stick. It kept evolving, infrastructure around it kept growing, but like it's kind of accepted now that there is like default framework and it is React. But the question is what's going to be in the future. And now once we got AI out of the door, and like the concept of AI is obviously not new and it's been around for ages, but now it can do something useful for us when it comes to writing code. I decided to question the entire concept of like what needs to happen next. I also want to advertise a book. I think it's one of the best engineering books anyone can read, and it's called Ego is the Enemy. It's actually a book about the Stoicism, but one of the concepts of this book that we should step back from what we personally feel attached and reconsider what our goals are, and so like what we are doing to achieve those goals, and like is it really the right way we are going to achieve our goals. And when you learn like all this stuff, it's easy to become a victim of sunken loss fallacy and think that's like, okay, I have invested so much time into learning something. What if it all has been wrong? And this entire presentation is built on thoughts, like chain of thoughts around like what if we tried to design the software architecture as assumption of like AI being the main centerpiece of us writing code. And so like if we try to rely on leveraging AI generation for writing our code. So there are actually 2 very different worlds of software engineering. Like if you think about it, if you want to build an e-commerce website, you have 2 options. Like you either have 20 software engineers doing it in a year, or you have freelancer from Upwork doing it for like $1,000 in 2 weeks. And in both outcomes, you're going to have e-commerce website. Clearly, those are going to be different quality e-commerce websites suitable for different needs. And arguably, option 1 is much more scalable and resilient than option 2. But the truth is that most of the internet actually falls in the bucket 2. And interestingly enough, like freelancer wouldn't get into the company of those 20 software engineers working alongside on their scalable solution, because freelancer is likely missing the skill of making scalable products and working in the bigger companies, cross-team collaboration, and so on and so on. But interestingly enough, the software engineer from the first company is also unlikely succeed as the freelancer, because there is just different mindsets, and securing e-commerce websites at the price which is competitive on the freelance market is hard. It needs you to think a little bit differently and prioritize velocity in the way which you haven't used to before. And as I mentioned before, like the second bucket is bigger. Like if you think about what is being used on the internet, like it's easier to understand that like this cool market of software engineers, of people who talk about like ASP.NET, like React, databases and stuff. It's like very niche subset of software engineering, but vast majority of internet still lives into this other niche of people building things quickly. And ultimately it resolves to comparison of scalability focused approach and simplicity focused approach. And when I say scalability, I mean it's not only ability for you to scale your app across 1,000 different replicas and 1,000 different databases. No, it's also ability to work in the large group on this single code base. Versus simplicity, like getting stuff really quickly with skills which are available on the market easily and skills which are easily obtainable. I decided to make like very ridiculous comparison, and since it's .NET event, we're going to compare WordPress to .NET. I'm not sure if you heard about WordPress, but it's the most popular content management system on the internet, and pretty much like 45-ish% of the entire internet currently is using WordPress. And this number is growing. So it's technology which has been released in 2003, and its adoption is still growing. And it's not because it's like well-designed piece of software architecture. No, it's actually quite vulnerable, in particular because of their plugin ecosystem. But the benefit of WordPress, that's like you can spend a day, you can read a book about like basics of PHP, and without proper coding experience, you can try to make a change in your WordPress website, and there is a good chance that you will succeed. Like the entry points of getting your first contribution into WordPress website is super simple. And the primary reason for that is because there is no high level of abstraction like at all. The way how you get data, the way how you display data, business logic, most of it lives together in the same place. So somebody who is new to software engineering will go with their find and replace tool, and like they want to change something on the page, they inspect the page, they see, okay, like this is called that. They go into their code base, they do find that, and they can basically edit the entire representation and data extraction of that. And so like collectively I recognize that. So like obviously it's a bad practice, and as a software engineering community recognize that that's not the way to go. But for some reason, this approach is much more approachable and easier for people without extensive software engineering experience to get on board with.
Alex, you've got a huge plugin ecosystem as well, so you can like make lots of stuff without having to write it yourself very easily.
You see even more edge over .NET. So it's my journey as well. When I was starting to build in software in 2011, I had very limited idea of what actually I can do. And WordPress has been extremely approachable. Like I got my first customer before I actually learned how to actually make something. And over the course of a couple of evenings, I was able to ship my first WordPress website, which wouldn't be the case with .NET. On the other side, in 2015, we were working for one of the biggest mobile network operators in Sweden, which decided to use WordPress as the framework for their admin panel. So you can go and see how much does it cost for you to like buy a roaming package, like buy more internet, and so on and so on. And we got to work on actually coding into WordPress database code base extensively with a team of 8 engineers, and it's been already quite an unpleasant experience. And that's a counterexample when having a proper framework would have benefited us more. And actually, it's been the final course of action which the company has taken. At some point, they abandoned WordPress and they decided to choose a proper framework. So clearly, those two different technologies, they live on like very polarizing edges of the spectrum, and of course there is different things in between. But those specific examples, they do not overlap. Like they solve very different business needs, and like if you try to compete with building blog websites on Upwork with .NET, you will just not be able to offer cost effectiveness of what other people can offer. And like, yeah, there hasn't been a book about C# in 24 hours yet, or has it? Anyways, with that in mind, let's just take those numbers again, look at these numbers again. Currently, we have 45% of total global web being WordPress. Just think about it. It means you can find so much data about using WordPress on the internet, given that 45% of it is built using WordPress. And another example on the JavaScript side is jQuery, which is floating around 78% adoption of the entire web today. Like, despite how developed front-end infrastructure is today, jQuery is still ridiculously popular on the internet. So, like, of course, it also accounts for websites which are not single-page applications and so on and so on. But if you think about how much data you get on GitHub gigs, how much data you get on Stack Overflow, how much data you get in people writing their blog posts, you will have overwhelming majority of the data for like those specific technologies. But like, it doesn't really matter to you, right? It just doesn't fit your use case, or does it? Recently, we got a new tool, which is AI. Clearly, there is a lot of hype, and people promised that we're going to get replaced many times already, and it is clearly not happening yet. And I'm not sure what's your experience. Actually, I would gladly hear your thoughts about this after this chat as well. But I worked in 2 companies now which tried to use AI to improve their velocity or quality and so on and so on. And it has never really made a big difference. Right? There were some quality of life improvements, but I didn't see the examples of people being replaced by AI or something like this. We're definitely not talking about gains like that. And so far, all I've seen is minor productivity boosts, which would not make a significant impact. Like, I didn't see any department which would tell us that like they noticeably improved their team's velocity by using like Copilot or something like this. So we got like also 2 very polarized groups of people. One who says that like in 5 years there won't be anybody need for anybody to do any intellectual job, and everybody is going to be replaced, universal income and whatnot. And the other side, we have people who say that like it's all just a hype and there is no actual value. My opinion is that probably we are somewhere in between, and we as the community, software engineering community, are still making our early steps trying to figure out what we can do with AI. And AI is not human. Like, if you think how generative AI differs from the person who writes codes, like there are some limitations. Like, AI operates on the limited token counts. Arguably, people do, but probably token count for actual humans is much higher. AI needs much more data to learn. Just experimenting and trying to find the way is not common, at least for large language models. So it's not what we are seeing. Like, we are still following the approach of dumping terabytes of data and like just trying to predict what the next character is going to be. So yeah, we need a lot of data, and the more data you have, the better it is. And there is plenty of research which suggests that abstraction reduces accuracy of generative AI outputs. So if you have function which calls a function, which calls a function, which calls a function, it's difficult, especially if it's distributed across different files. And then there is also object-oriented programming, and you start inheriting stuff. And the more you do it, the more difficult it becomes for large language models to generate the accurate output. So basically, abstractions are not good. And size of input and output decreases accuracy. Like if you approach the maximum token count which model can take in, the quality of the output decreases. We are still yet to see similar research made for recent models, but since there hasn't been technological breakthrough in how we design those models, I would expect that the outcomes are going to be the same. And what it actually means for us, like if we break it down, like we want to write a short code. So if you think about like what's the best technology for us to write our AI generated code in, it's the technology which doesn't have a lot of boilerplates, because boilerplate effectively consumes our token count and brings the accuracy down ultimately. And we are interested in keeping it short. Then we can retain the accuracy throughout different iterations when you, for example, query model to make improvements to the code and so on and so on. Then we are interested in having a lot of training data. Like if you choose technology which is not really popular, then you're going to have very limited training data. And even if the language is ultimately simple to use and quite concise, you might still have the poor outcomes because training data was not sufficient. You're interested in writing low abstraction procedural code. Like if your approach is based on some tricky inheritance throughout multiple files, a lot of imports, it's becoming much less trivial for the model to generate a good code. And in my experiments, I found out that like the more imports you get, and especially you get like file import in another file, and then you import from another file, like all those imports, they tends to break the link at some points, and model tends to forget that they were importing something from another file when you changed this data in another file, even if you like tell the model that you made this change. Yeah, and again, like we are interested in writing smaller code. So
we had Alex, just a quick question.
Yeah.
So Stephen's wondering about AI assistance and augmentation developing in quantum computing environments. If you have any comment on whether it's helpful there.
Quantum computing environments? I have no idea.
All right.
No worries. Sorry, but no. Yeah, let me jump 2 slides forward. I have an example of language being somewhat simple, but AI not doing a great job with this. Recently, I decided to make a furniture, and as a software engineer, I decided to choose the most retarded approach to make it. I decided to code it. It's been I honestly tried to use some open source CAD software for doing so. It's been difficult to master, and even though I actually have like real architecture degree, I studied like construction and this stuff for 5 years. I still struggle to get on board with open source CAD software. So I decided to code my furniture. And while the entire code of this unit is not really big, it's like around 350 lines total, I had very mixed experience by using this model. Even though like entire thing lives in the same file, like there is no imports, there was very limited possibility for abstraction usage because the language is very limited, and language is also very well documented. Like it's not like it's some obscure thing. It's well documented, but because data set is so small, I couldn't get model even be effective with minor refactorings, which asked me, model to do for me. So it's kind of example of what you achieve if you go to this list and you just check one of the boxes but ignore the others. Like you are really, really, really interested in getting all of them combined. Another example, which was like partial check of the boxes. In Personia, we are building design system, and since we have quite a large company, like we have over 700 engineers, and many of those people actually use our design system directly. So quality of documentation you write has far-fetching consequences. Like if you are not clear in the language you use, if you describe naming in non-ubiquitous way, or you are missing the features from your documentation, you're going to get people either making mistakes or they're going to approach you and ask questions. And when you have hundreds of people asking you questions, it's not a sustainable way of working. Like you just cannot help everybody effectively in person. So you get to be very intentional how you write your documentation. And we decided to cut the corner, and I tried to experiment with writing a script which would parse the data for the components, and then it would generate the output documentation based on the files. So what did I do? I wrote a script which would concatenate all the files which belong to the components, keep and place the name and their location in the file tree so we can retain the import structure. So if one file imports another file, then we are all good. Then I would also concatenate the utils which are imported from the outside of the components, like the shared code. So the model is also aware about the shared code. And the difference has been striking. Like if we are talking about the simple components like button, for example, which doesn't have a lot of nested architecture, and like it's quite flat and the amount of code is limited, results were much, much, much better than if we had hierarchy codes with a lot of encapsulation with different data thingies going in there. So basically, while it seems obvious, maybe it's very important to highlight that having high popular technology, which was React and JavaScript, but high level of nesting still didn't work, even like on the latest models. So that's another problem which we have encountered. So having simple code in unpopular language is failure. Having high abstraction code in popular language has been a failure as well. And this observation persisted with me throughout all my experience of trying to get something out of React. Once you start getting your data, once you start using hooks and other non-obvious side effects, because the implementation is hidden from the model, like model needs to know how does the React work to use those abstractions effectively, you get less accuracy in the code, and actually the code you generate is less likely to work without tweaking. So usefulness of it decreases a lot. So I spent some time thinking like, okay, if React is not an option, even though it is currently what we want to work with as a community, let's think what other options we would consider. Like what framework needs the least boilerplate, and what framework needs the least code to write the minimal app. In case of React, for example, I still have to import a bunch of dependencies. I still have to initialize the app, and it's larger. Well, for example, with vanilla JavaScript, what I can do, I can write one line of code and display something in the HTML. So there's clearly a room for improvements. Then we need to avoid heavy abstractions. And as I mentioned before, like React is quite abstract, especially recently. With hooks, there is a lot of so-called magic going on. So I was interested to see what is much less implicit and much more explicit in the way you write code. So something more procedural would be more of a benefit here. And ideally, I didn't want to have a lot of files, because when you get many files, then you would decrease the efficiency of the model as well. It also needs to have a lot of training data. So most of modern hipster frameworks, even if I find them very nice to work with, they wouldn't really suffice because there is not enough training data. And also models usually lagging behind when it comes to slice of data they were trained on. So if something appears today, model is going to know about it only like in a year or so in order to use them effectively. And another like very, very important consideration point has been backwards compatibility. Like if you think about it, we can have a framework which has been around for like 20 years. But if every couple of years it introduces breaking changes, it's going to confuse the model a lot, because model doesn't really recognize the differences between different versions of technology. And that's been one of my complaints which I had with React. Sometimes AI models would suggest me to combine the libraries which wouldn't work together. For example, simply because one of them is ESM modules and another one is CommonJS. So it's been like 4 factors which I wanted to consider. And the question to the audience, like if you think about this, what framework comes to mind?
I think you might be leading us in a certain direction, Alex, from the earlier graphs. What have we got? Francis has given us a VB framework, being a .NET user group. Fair enough. Visual Basic .NET.
That was the first commercial language that I have my money on.
Raymond's put up jQuery. And Raymond says that Rails will have choke on a code base with Rails with a lot of monkey patching. I mean, Rails I can comment on. It's got a high level of abstraction, like it's an MVC setup. So it's, yeah, it has to understand all the usual stuff, and the views and the models and, you know, controllers and how it all hooks together. So probably not meeting the criteria.
Good. I think we had rather correct answer in this audience. It's a presentation about jQuery. So let's spend some time talking about jQuery in 2024, like seriously, because it just makes sense. Like the more you think about it, the more it makes sense. Clearly, like we are not happy to use jQuery. Like if community has been happy with jQuery, we wouldn't introduce all other technologies, right? But if you would think about it, like for 10% gain, obviously you wouldn't use jQuery for like anything. But if it would let you move 90% faster, like let's assume that you have to spend only 10% of the time you usually would spend on writing your code to actually like code, would you tolerate having jQuery in your code base? And then the question becomes much less obvious and much more debatable. Like clearly there are different use cases, and like I don't want to make it sound like everybody needs to use jQuery now, but I think that there is some merit to using jQuery for some of the projects. And if we try to change the direction of thoughts we have, instead of like, okay, we use technology X, like we use React, and how do we apply AI to write better React? And we think like, okay, we have AI, and so what we use to write faster is AI. We probably want to have some architecture which enables it. We also do not want to use the benefits of the modern web, right? So there are something what helps. You can place root HTML with like menu, sidebars, and other UI elements which needs to remain on the page in the root HTML file, which you write manually and you maintain it manually. You have some router, which is standalone router. And what it does, it basically fetches the HTML partial on different root, and then it would render HTML partial on the page. HTML partial can contain pretty much everything. It can contain a script. I was very intentional in saying script as a singular. Like you want to try to keep it a single file if you want, because it shows greater improvements of the accuracy of generation, and it also makes copy pasta exercise much more straightforward. And then you have styles. In my experiments, I found it helpful to separate styles generated by AI and styles which you write. You can write your styles with greater specificity, so you can override the styles which are generated by AI. And therefore, you won't have to let AI know about the context of everything that you basically wrote. Of course, like it's terrible architecture in the grand scheme of things, but if you think about it for a second, then you can write the script which would concatenate like everything on this page, HTML, scripts, and style together in one query to AI, and then add your requests to this, parse response you get, and populate 3 different files. You have your HTML file, your script, and your styles. Currently, there is no out-of-the-box tooling. I think it's the matter of time until we have something better for the newer models. I think once the recent, for example, ChatGPT 01 goes out of the preview, I think we're going to get much more advanced features in Copilot, for example. So until then, you can just use OpenAI API to query your files and try to see what happens. There are some example data where I try to collect my examples of usage of different AI applications. Like I try to build a block with Gatsby. It's React application. So Gatsby is Jamstack tool, which allows me to pre-render my React block into static files. And then once I load the static file, and if it's the real browser is going to hydrate the app with React and use it, like the rest of the app is going to behave as a single page application. So I get both like quick loading speed, I get search engine optimization, and also I get speed of actual single page application if real person opens it. It was miserable. Like, I really struggled to get code even work after a couple of iterations, and I had to spend a lot of time manually modifying the code. Originally, I started making this presentation with Real.js, which is HTML presentation tool. I just gave up when I started doing charts. But before that, I had quite good results from AI. Like I could have done the entire presentation with AI just by telling what to display. There is a game which I'm going to show you. I made it in an hour yesterday, and yeah, it's just jQuery script living in the same file and HTML. Kind of, double down on this and try to show what possibilities we have. And every single time the code I would get would work, I would get 0 warnings or errors. And all features I wanted, they would work. The problem is that once you ask for conflicting features, yeah, I wouldn't slap you in the face and tell you that you shouldn't do this. It will just implement features which wouldn't work the way intended. Yeah, and also I'm working on the side projects for people who learn Dutch language right now. And I'm building it with jQuery using the methodology I displayed earlier, like this one. And I have really great outcomes, with the problems being primarily on linguistical side of things and not actually programming. So I think it's great, and I think we need to do some demo. So in Eastern Slavic countries, we have a fairy tale, and it's the fairy tale about piece of bread, like round piece of bread, which had very difficult relationship with his parents, who basically baked this bread. And so like people like this fairy tale a lot, especially software engineer, because it's very easy to make sprites for the round piece of bread. And that's pretty much what I did here. What you can see here is AI generated. I wrote 0 lines of code myself. Like I wrote styles because AI still sucks in CSS. But besides that, like pretty much every single line of JavaScript is written by AI. Like it's turn-based, it's intentionally turn-based. Because there are some enemies moving, and so like it wants to count your steps to make sure you avoid them. Like it has keys which open the doors. The entire map is procedurally generated, and so like you collect coins, and you have like step counter, you have doors. So all the mazes are possible. The only problem being like this logical conflict, which I mentioned before, that it has enemies which navigate throughout the map. And sometimes you might get into the situation when enemy is unavoidable. But besides that, and actually enemy has even some logic to persuade you as the player. It is written in the way which people normally do not use to make games. Like what you see here is not canvas. What you see here is CSS table, CSS grid. So basically, like everything is divs. And so like when I move the thing, it changes the location of the entire container to make sure that the camera is centered. And yeah, it's pretty much HTML. And it's not something what has been built before. It's not like AI has taken the model which already existed on the internet. No, it actually followed my instructions, which were quite specific, like use the data grid, like use this kind of objects, like have it turn-based, make sure that's like you cannot step on the walls, like and so on and so on. But with the right instructions and a couple of iterations, I was able to reach this. And for what is worth, sprites of coins, keys, the bread, and the stones, they're all AI generated as well. Like the only thing which I had is to remove the background, and that's it. So I must say I'm quite impressed. Like we have went a long way from having AI which generates you 30 lines of code successfully in 50% of the time, to the place where I got a bunch of jQuery codes successfully generated multiple times throughout different iterations, all times run successfully. And we are talking about 336 lines of code. And it's like, it's not terrible code. Like it's jQuery code, but it's not terrible jQuery code. Like I do not feel annoyed by this. Like I can maintain it if I have to, but like it's completely manageable code. And so like I got the comments, I got all the spacings done nicely. I got all the naming in the way which makes sense. Like same as HTML. And only thing which I had to extend is CSS. I had to write 70 lines of CSS code to make it look nicer than it used to be. So I must say that I find it quite shocking for myself. I definitely didn't expect this outcome at all. Before preparing to this presentation, I started working on another example. Didn't get to finish it yet, but I was working on the reminder tool for birthdays. I'm very bad in remembering people's birthdays, and not because I hate them or something, but because I'm not organized. And I had very good example generating Express.js and SQLite backends without like any hiccups whatsoever, just working out of the box and generating jQuery frontend using the methodology I showed a little bit earlier. So let's make a couple of wrapping up parts here. Not everything is perfect. All models would ignore logical collisions. Like at first, the maze, for example, wasn't really as narrow, and you had much more moving space, which would allow you for avoiding enemies. But once I specified the way I want the map to be generated, we got examples when enemy is just placed in the narrow corridor, and then it runs after you, and you have no way to avoid the enemy. When changing code manually, sending it back and telling the model that's like you want to use it moving forward, you can get the answer that's like, cool, of course, I'm gonna do this, and then nothing happens. And yeah, even AI is bad in CSS, which makes me feel a little bit better about myself. There's some cautious optimism too. Copilot for the newer model is not there, but I really want to see what Copilot using O1 is going to be. I think integration of the approach, which I mentioned, into your development environments might actually invalidate some of the concerns I have right now, in particular division between different files, complexity of imports, and so on. Like if you would have the IDE handling concatenation for you and explaining the model how it works, I think you might have even better results. O1 is a very small model. That's another concern. Some of the queries get you over the minutes to generate. Like if you didn't use the latest model, you might think that like it's a couple of seconds as it used to be before. But chain of the commands means that the model is repetitively questioning itself. Maybe you have seen AutoGPT before, which will do the same, like query itself until the final result which you outlined is reached. Chain of thought is like much more advanced version of it, but still it's like repetitive query of the model to itself until the acceptable results is reached. And sometimes it takes seconds, sometimes it takes over a minute, and I don't know what the upper bound rate is. And when it takes a minute, I imagine that compute cost for it is not cheap. There have been some rumors about full-fledged O1 model being priced differently and becoming some kind of corporate tier, which is much more expensive because of much more expensive compute needed for it. But only time will tell us. And kind of as a side evidence of that is that this model has usage thresholds right now. I think currently it's 30 queries a day, and then you're being downgraded to GPT-4. Yeah, and you can ask model to challenge your code. Not always you get like really helpful comments. And even like with the latest model, it still needs a lot of improvement there. So enthusiasm, like do I feel enthusiastic about it? I think that there is some new application for this. I think that clearly for vast majority of the enterprise customers, enterprise companies, it's not going to make sense right now. But if you're talking about some internal admin panels and other low risk, low throughput applications, I think that there is a good chance to cut a lot of corners. Like if you're building something what is like disposable or semi-disposable code base, you can achieve much higher velocity. You can build prototypes much quicker for your tools. Like programming with this approach for my language project right now, it's just fantastic. I have never been able to move so fast as I move right now. Like I get tons of progress if I get an hour to work on the project. And yeah, I think that smaller companies with limited budget might really benefit from trying to use something like this. So I do not anticipate that we're going to like seriously use jQuery on scale. I don't think that it's happening. But if you want to build something quick, build some prototype, build some cheap tool, I think it might be a good tool for you to use. And yeah, as the wrapping notes, the game has performance issues. I had to artificially decrease the map size because I didn't really care about the performance. And even though I have some of the latest MacBooks here, I still have this problem. So clearly it's not solving all the needs. It's solving only some of them. But in the end of the day, it's not a code I want to write. It's a code I'm happy not writing. Thank you all. If you have any questions, let's talk about them.
All right, so pop in some questions in the chat, and I have one, Alex, just to start. Did you try with vanilla JS?
Yeah, vanilla is quite good, but what I found is that crazy popularity of jQuery actually brought jQuery onto higher amounts of data in Stack Overflow than actually native JavaScript, vanilla JavaScript. But all in all, vanilla JS is good.
Have we got any questions from the audience there? Good. Or do you try HTMLX from Andrew?
No. Unfortunately, I did not. But
maybe that's still got some hipster cool and has a lot of the everything together business, I think. Do you try with PHP as well? I mean, you seem to be leading in that direction too.
Yeah, I didn't try PHP, but I want to. I'm not sure if you follow the PHP news. Most of the people don't. And like, I do not follow PHP news myself normally as well. Like, I didn't do PHP since 2013 or something. But recently, one of the most advanced PHP frameworks got 50 million in investments. So they're going to be building the clouds and monetizing their framework by allowing people to deploy it nicely. But yeah, it kind of shows that there is still life in PHP and it might be worth trying to get somewhere. Some of the popular frameworks, such as Laravel or Symfony, going to have the same problem which we have with React, for example. Like they have MVC, they have hidden abstractions, and they're going to make it more difficult for AI to generate a good output. But there are also frameworks like Falcon PHP. There were some other ones which let you write very minimal apps, like Express.js, for example. In Express.js, you can write the entire thing in one file. I'm not saying that like normally you should, like in normal circumstances, it's a very bad practice. But in the context of reducing imports and trying to optimize for AI, you can get greater benefits with those minimal PHP frameworks. But then you also get much lower popularity of those PHP frameworks and much lower code base to learn upon in those frameworks. Something like WordPress might be actually be helpful, but I didn't test WordPress. And yeah, at this point of my life, I don't feel like I want to spend time on this.
Fair enough. I still have my blog on WordPress, but the days of touching the code are long past. Just applying updates mainly to it. It's just been there for many years, started in WordPress and lives on there.
I mean, that's the beauty of it. It works.
Yeah, it works fairly well. And, some of the architectural problems are just hidden away by cache layers and other things that you get plugins for and stuff. So it's interesting how much you can paper over the cracks if you keep adding plugins. So we've got a comment. Any comment about alpine.js from C# of T?
I would say the same story with HTMX. Didn't try this one specifically myself, and do not think we're going to get exceptional results because of the dataset size. So it's going to be a minimal framework, which is checking the box of having less code and less boilerplate. But then we hit the wall of limited training data.
Which was the PHP framework that received 50 mil?
I was thinking about Falcon PHP.
Falcon, okay.
It's quite old. I remember I was talking about it in 2014. And it's been released in 2012. And like if you go and see examples, you can actually see that like you can effectively write the entire thing in one file. Oh my god, it changed so much since last time I've seen it.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Ruby's got like Sinatra, where you can write all the the gets and posts and things in line, and just write it all in line in basically in the router. Might be something like that. So I mean, you could just do it all in the one file and forget about any abstraction, and just put in your database calls or whatever directly.
Yeah.
From there.
I was thinking that if like one of the tools for programming like those AI assistants is going to start sending entire import tree concatenated, we're going to get better results. Like for example, if like you have the import, but if you replace the import with actual code of what you import before sending it to the model, you're going to get better result. But then still you have this like abstraction layer, which is going to make it less effective.
You know what? My question for one of the JetSbrain licenses has just been answered in the chat. As Francis was suggesting, I was going to ask what the name of the book was, which is "Ego is the Enemy," but Raymond has already answered the question, even though I didn't pose the question. So, Raymond, if you do want another JetBrains license, say yes. Otherwise, I'll make up a new question. But you do deserve it for answering even the question before it was posed. All right. And does anyone have any other questions? You do want it, Raymond? All right. I'll give you one, Raymond. I do have a second question, which is an easier one. So yeah, what did Alex find was the best supported framework for AI generation? Pretty easy, right? The first one was hard, so I thought I'd give you an easy one as the second one. First one, yes. All right, Stephen, you get it. Thanks, Francis, for the most. Well, I don't think Fortran would necessarily be bad. There should be a big corpus, right, Alex, of information on Fortran, and it's in one file, I think.
Yeah, actually, it has a lot of potential, I think.
And also it's like short programs. Not that I'm a Fortran programmer, but my understanding is you often have like a short scientific program, so it may well be, Francis.
But I also wonder what's going to be like Stack Overflow size of Fortran.
Might be.
Well, I imagine like Fortran developers actually read documentation before asking questions.
It is possible that they're a bit older and less scripty-ish and more academic, but there's probably a lot on Fortran. I just haven't looked.
Yeah.
So, all right. So I think we've got the answers to the questions. So Raymond and Stephen, please send me your email address as a meetup message, or actually I probably have your emails, but just send it just in case. And does anyone have any more questions for Alex before we close? I'll give you 10 seconds. Stephen says, "What's Dutch for thank you?" I think is your last question.
Bedankt.
Well, thank you very much, Alex. It was a very interesting, thought-provoking talk, and I've been messing around with AI as well, and what you say around the complexity and the size of it and the popularity and stuff, I think fits very well. I experimented more with vanilla JS than the jQuery. Not that I have anything against jQuery, mind you, but my most successful AI generation was generating like an entire grid system using vanilla JS with GPT-4o. So it aligns. When you get abstractions, I agree, it gets a lot harder to get something useful. So it's great you've done the real experiments as well, rather than just vague feeling, which is kind of where I think most people are at, of what things will work and what won't work. So very valuable, and good luck on your actual project using it with the Dutch language.
Thank you, folks, and really hope that you're not going to cancel me for talking about jQuery seriously in 2024.
There's nothing, as you say, it's one of the most popular JavaScript frameworks.
I think I'm first in line when it comes to being cancelled. So you need to get back in line, Alex.
Right.
Well, we very much enjoyed your talk, and if you have anything in the future that tweaks your interest, we'd be very happy to have you on again.
Perfect. Thank you so much, folks.
And before we go, we're always looking for speakers as well. So if anyone wants to give a presentation, we're pretty friendly crowd here. We don't bite, we don't judge, and we'll hopefully we'll have some laughs and learn a thing or two on the way. So we're always looking out for speakers. So feel free to contact either myself or James if you fancy having a go.
Yeah, it's in the terms and conditions of the JetBrains license. Actually, you have to give a presentation before the JetBrains license expires in a year.
I think that's a very good one, actually. Yeah, you need to give back. You can't just always take. I like that.
Maybe we'll have to introduce that. Thank you very much, everyone, and we'll see you next month.
All right. See you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Ciao.